morning, everyone. This is session number 4 for chapter 3, and today we are going to discuss the year-end adjustments. طيب, last time we discussed together adjustments. When I explained كده very quickly that we have 4 types of adjustments: the prepaid expenses, the unearned revenue, and the accrued revenue and the accrued expenses. And we said that in the revenue adjustments, we can do an adjustment regarding the interest on investment and delinquent taxes, which means this is the interest that is due on investment made by the government or on delinquent taxes. We said that the interest on the delinquent taxes are there because you are past due. يعني you didn't pay the tax within the due date. So actually here you have to consider this as revenue even if you didn't receive it yet. Right. And then the unbilled charge for services, the services that the government provided but they didn't receive the amount of that service yet. And we talked about the unrestricted intergovernmental grants that are due but have not been received, which means this is a grant that will be refunded for us whenever they are going to satisfy specific condition or meet specific condition. Type. And the other one, which is the expenditure adjustments, and this is the interest on short-term debt. This is the normal interest on the debt, and the accrued payroll, which is the expenses of salaries that the government didn't pay yet. And we explained the first type, and it was interest and penalties on taxes of 550, of which 50 is expected to be uncollectible. And we said here that the interest and penalties receivable is 550. The 50 will be credited for the allowance for uncollectible interest and penalties, and the remaining will be considered as the revenue, and this is an interest and penalties on the past due receivables, okay? So actually this was the first type of adjustment that we need to do at the end of the period. Second, accrued interest on investment. Accrued interest on investment at the year end was 400. This is a return on investment that will be accrued to the government. So actually I will say accrued interest receivable or interest receivable right away. I don't care يعني. And crediting revenue for the same amount. So actually here you you earned the interest on your investment, but actually here you have to record that amount even if that you did not receive the amount yet. So actually it is interest receivable and revenue. Interest receivable and revenue. Right. The accrued interest on the short-term debt. Accrued interest on the short-term notes payable at the year end was 250. And of course here we are talking about expenditure. Why? Because it is interest on the short-term note. The short-term note. So actually it will be expenditure and accrued interest payable. Accrued interest payable. So actually here we have to keep in mind that all the interest must go first through expenditure. يبقى هنا ال 3 examples دول represented some of the adjustments that we have to make at the year end. Those are the most famous يعني. خلاص؟ طيب. Actually the other أو the topic before the last يعني is the closing entry. And if you remember, we used to close all the nominal accounts. يعني in the private sector, in the financial accounting, we are closing 4 main accounts. ولا 3. Revenue. Okay. Expenses. And both of them will be closed in the retained earning. And we had dividends. طبعا in earlier يعني stage you used to use something we called or an account called to be called income summary, but the income summary is used if this is a sole proprietorship or a partnership. لكن in case of the corporation we are using the retained earning to close these three accounts, revenue, expenses and dividend. So actually here also in the government we need to do a closing entry at the end of the year to close the operating accounts in the general ledger. So they will begin the next year with zero balance and update the unreserved fund balance to its actual end of the year balance, and to close the subsidiary revenue and expenditure so they are ready to record the next year detailed operating. يعني you have to close all of these accounts in order to start the new year with zero balance. Okay, يعني let's see an example for the closing entry. طيب طبعا of course the revenue account has a credit balance as you all know. يعني revenue always have a credit balance. يبقى in order to close it and I have to debit it. So this is what the government did. Revenue debited for 438,100. Okay, طيب. And the expenditure's nature is debit. So actually, in order to credit it, in order to close it, I have to credit it, and this is what I did. Revenue was debited, and the expenditure were credited, and all the transfers بقى will be closed. طبعا depending بقى على nature of the transaction we did along the chapter. يعني you have to go back and see the nature of all the types of transfers that have come. Okay, if it is debit, so actually it will be credited, and if it is credited, it will be debited. And here also the special item, if you remember the part that we sold out of the properties of the government. طيب, the extraordinary item, the amount of insurance that we recovered. And on the other hand, the transfers, which means it is some sort of expenditure. It is not actually expenditure, but it is transfers of the resources of the governmental entity out of the governmental entities. Okay? طيب. يبقى actually we are going to credit these transfers, the correction of error that we made together of the prior year, and the difference between the two sides, the debit and the credit, will be either debited or credited to the unreserved fund balance. Okay, the difference between the two sides will be debited or credited to the unreserved fund balance. Okay. Type the reserve for encumbrances. Type, what is the reserve for encumbrances? The encumbrances is a reserve that we are keeping some of the fund inside it in order to finance an action that already started during the previous year, okay, and it will be continue in the next year. يعني we are saying that this reserve indicate that portion of the fund balance not available for appropriation. This one is reserved for specific, okay, activity. This activity have been started during the previous year. So the reserve for encumbrances indicate amount that must be appropriated next year for transaction started in the current year. Okay, is the outstanding order. Type, the government has $20,000 of unfilled order outstanding at the year end. يعني which means ان احنا we made an order but we did not receive yet, okay, the thing that we already ordered. طيب, فبنقول كده the unreserved fund balance will decrease. يعني part of the resources from the unreserved fund balance will decrease because the nature of the unreserved fund balance is credit. طيب, and a reserve for encumbrances will be credited. يبقى actually I appropriated, I reserved, I set aside part of the unreserved fund balance as a reserve for encumbrances related to this 20,000 of the unfilled order. Okay, يبقى actually as if ان انا I made a reserve, I set aside amount of money in order to خلاص meet the obligation that will be resulted from receiving this order. طيب اوكي ماشي. The next بقى step was to moving to the general fund financial statement. General fund financial statements احنا we have a group of financial statement واحنا we actually talked about some of them when we talked about the wide financial or government wide financial statement and the fund financial statement. طيب احنا actually we have some main financial statement like مثلا the balance sheet, the statement of revenue, expenditure and the change in fund balance, and we have also revenue, expenditure and the change in fund balance, budget to actual. طيب in budget to actual financial statement احنا we are comparing what has been forecasted or budgeted by the government at the beginning of the year and we compare it to the actual that the government achieved at the end of the year, and the variance must be analyzed in order to make sure okay that the government have a specific or a logical justification for the variance. Okay, طيب يبقى actually those financial statements will include mainly the statement, even بقى يعني either it is a balance sheet, statement of revenue, expenditure and change in fund balance as a part of the basic financial statement, and we will have the schedule that we talked about at the beginning of chapter 2, which including a lot of things among of required supplementary information, and we said that the required supplementary informations are information that has a demographic nature. Okay, طيب in our scope in that course actually we are going to talk about the long-term loan and the main financial statements to be prepared by us, which is a statement of revenue, expenditure and change in the fund type balance. Before I go for the statement, I will take that transaction that saying that suppose that 5,000 long-term inter-fund loan repaid in 2003 was made from the general fund to special revenue fund at the end of 2000x1. The general fund entry to record the loan at the end of 2x1 would be this is for a long-term loan, if you remember. And we said if we have a long-term loan, we have advance 2, and this one will be debited for the advance to special revenue fund, and the cash is decreasing from the general fund. يعني advance to special revenue fund, this amount have been loaned to the special revenue fund, and the cash credited and decreased from that. طيب. The reserve, which is unreserved fund balance 5,000, and the credited reserve for advance to special revenue fund 5,000. طيب هنا I decreased part of the unreserved and I reserved it for the advance to special revenue fund as they are to be paid later to the general fund. طيب whenever بقى we will go from that to the balance sheet, we will see that the current assets, as you can see here, equal to current liabilities plus fund balance, and this is the equation that we used. And here I'm giving a definition for the reserved, which is with a specific reserve identified, and the unreserved, which may be further divided into designated and indesignated. The reserved, this is resources with a specific identification. It will be used for a specific purpose. On the other hand, the unreserved is free to be used. This cannot be changed, but here this one is free to be used. طيب. And this will lead me to that what are the main types of reserves that we can find out. We have the encumbrances and we talked about it. we have the petty cash. Okay, we have the inventory and we have the advances. All of those are common reserves that the government can make in order to satisfy something in the future. Okay, right, very good. And this will be taken out of the unreserved fund balance as we talked about. And this is the unused, the available for appropriation and expenditure. And it is done by or specified by the finance director. And it is less than the reserve because the reserve cannot be used for any other purpose. But here, the unreserved must be used for that. Okay. Right. The last thing to be discussed in that chapter is the statement of revenue, expenditure, and the change in fund balance. And actually, this is will be our topic next time, inshallah, because next time we are going to finish that chapter. And actually, after that, we will start the practical part related to chapter 3. Yani actually, this is the last thing to be done next time, the application or the explanation for that statement. Maybe we will go directly to solve the equation, okay, for that. And then we will start doing some practice on the entries that we already explained. And this will be the end of chapter 3. Next time, inshallah, we are going to explain the statement of revenue, expenditure, and change in fund balance to finish that chapter.